The following are soldiers' terrifying encounters with mystery monsters during times of war. One of the strangest encounters takes us to Mons, Belgium during World War I, and it took place during the Battle of Mons. This conflict was considered subsidiary action to the Battle of the Frontiers, in which the Allied forces fought the German army on French borders. This is also the first time the British Expeditionary Forces took part in World War I. The British soldiers' responsibility was to hold the line at the Mons Canal against the advancing German First Army. At the time, the British Expeditionary Forces, or the BEF, at 80,000 men, was considered the smallest unit in the Allied forces. But in spite of having the smallest army, the BEF were considered the most highly trained European force. It's said that they could hit a man-sized target at 300 yards 15 times in 1 minute with their Enfield rifles. So the fighting began on August 23, 1914, when the Germans made their first advance. And though the German army greatly outnumbered them, the BEF, along with other Allied forces, were able to hold them off. The bloodshed continued for the next couple months, as any battle would, until one night on November 14, 1914. According to veteran F.J. Newhouse, it was on this night that something horrific would take place, and it would change the dynamic of the war for both sides for the remainder of the conflict. The first terrifying incident took place when Captain Yeskis of the French Army, along with 4 London Fusiliers, would brave the perils of no man's land to carry out a patrol of the area. The next day came, but the soldiers never returned. This, in and of itself, wasn't anything unusual. As the blood-weary battle took place, soldiers often went missing. It wasn't until several days later when they found the captain and the missing Fusiliers, their bodies mutilated, their throats ripped out. They were riddled with gaping flesh wounds from something feasting on them. A fear swept over the Allied forces like a plague. Nobody had any idea what could have done this to their fellow soldiers. A few days went by with no activity, so the men began to slowly calm down. Until one night, as they were sitting around their campfires anticipating the next day's battle, a bone-chilling howl would pierce the desolate darkness of no man's land. The monstrous shriek could be heard by both sides, and it was allegedly so terrifying that some of the men immediately wanted to retreat. Some soldiers described it as a howl from hell. For the next 2 years, they continued to find soldiers in no man's land mangled with their throats ripped out, as if something large mauled them to death. Whatever it was a vicious beast, and its otherworldly wails became commonplace among the soldiers. They heard them every single night. Occasionally, they'd even hear the deathly screams from soldiers across the battlefield, indicating that the other side, the Germans, were experiencing the same thing. So this beast did not discriminate. It didn't matter which side you were on or who you were. He was out for blood. The nighttime roars increased in frequency, and it was around this time that the soldiers stationed at the sentry guns surrounding no man's land said they saw a large gray hound lurking on the edges of the battlefield. They described it as having a superhuman physique, and that it moved with insane agility and speed, that it possessed large glowing eyes and razor-sharp teeth. It continued to prowl the bloody battlefield of the Mons, claiming victim after victim, adding to its list. Until one day, as suddenly as the beast appeared, it was gone, and the attacks ceased. After the war, Newhouse got back home and shared his story, and it became widely circulated. It would gain even more notoriety when Newhouse would claim that German doctor Gottlieb Hochmuller was behind creating the beast. He claimed that the doctor took the brain of a madman and put it in a Siberian wolfhound. And not only that, he enhanced its growth and made it bigger. Newhouse stated in the 1919 Oklahoman article, and I quote, "The death of Dr. Gottlieb in the recent Spartakian riots in Berlin has brought to light the facts concerning the fiendish application of this German scientist's skill that have astounded Europe. For the Hound of Mons was not an accident, a phantom, or a hallucination. It was the deliberate result of one of the strangest and most repulsive scientific experiments the world has ever known." Accounts later stated that the doctor, on top of making the beast bigger, increased its capacity for hatred chemically. Also, that its hide was made to be impenetrable by bullets. Newhouse also stated that upon the doctor's murder, they found all the documents verifying his story in his belongings. Whether this story is just a piece of wartime folklore or has elements of truth, we'll probably never know. Regardless, this wartime folklore will forever go down in history as the Hellhound of Mons. The next account comes from A.G. Starkey from World War II. He was stationed on a British vessel operating off the coast of the Maldives. One evening, while they were anchored, Starkey claimed he went up on the deck and looked out over the water. That's when he'd noticed a large black mass moving towards the ship. As it was moving past the vessel, he claims to have spotted it with his flashlight, spotting the most monstrous squid he had ever seen or heard of. He claimed that the beast stretched the entire length of the vessel, which was 175 feet, larger than any squid on record. Starkey said, and I quote, "As I gazed upon the creature, a green, luminous light shone in the rays of my flashlight. As it swam by, the large, unwinking orb I suddenly realized was its eye. The surface of the water bubbled with disturbance. That's when suddenly I realized I was gazing upon a giant squid." Since he was the only crew member that saw it, there's no way to actually verify this story. The British weren't the only ones. The Japanese seemed to be plagued by encounters with sea monsters as well. A report states that during World War II, one of their scouting ships was attacked by an underwater beast. One of the crew members states that all of a sudden there was a large surge of water near the vessel. Then suddenly, something rammed into the side of the ship. It was about 50 feet long, had a white underbelly, and an alligator-like snout. After slamming the ship, the beast turned around, swam out a couple hundred feet, and then turned around again and slammed back into the ship. It kept doing this again and again until finally it actually started to shift the boat sideways to the starboard side. Then suddenly the crew's instincts kicked in. They grabbed the rifles and began firing on the beast. Shortly after peppering the beast with their rifles, it would swim down and disappear into the depths. These wouldn't be the only strange encounters the Japanese had during World War II. Amidst heavy fighting at the Guadalcanal in 1942 and 43 on the Solomon Islands, they had the strangest encounter probably documented in the war. Japanese troops started coming back from the mosquito-infested jungles with strange stories of 10 to 15 foot tall humanoids. These beasts were covered in long, reddish-brown hair. They had wide mouths, flat noses, and were very strong. Sometimes they were even said to have crude weapons, large sticks or clubs. These giants were known to be quite aggressive, and they would even attack troops on occasion. They were known to crash through the thick foliage, knocking over trees with no problem at all. They would describe them as having pure raw power, and these beasts knew how to display it by crashing trees and breaking large branches. The soldiers would be kept awake all night by loud wailing and crashing from these beasts. Their calls and their cries would pierce the night silence and wake them up out of a dead sleep. They would wander all night, making noise and disturbing the soldiers, threatening them and scaring the daylights out of them. The Solomon Islands have a long history of giants, dating back to King Solomon himself. The locals are well aware of it and have folklore dating back thousands of years referring to them. There are still sightings and footprints spotted today left behind by these massive beasts. For those of you that stay tuned in, these are the beasts that Peter Kane dog training guy has. That's what these are. What he has is not Bigfoot. It is actually giants. Think about it. How did they describe them? A prominent brow, flat nose, wide mouth, red hair from head to toe. If you get a chance, check it out. You'll see what I'm talking about. He has a whole family of them that his father had supposedly killed in a swamp where he lives. The largest adult male's head weighs 120 pounds. Next, a declassified CIA document that states 23 Russian soldiers were turned to stone by extraterrestrials. Behind me, you'll notice a declassified CIA document, of which I'll share the link to the full document in the description. Upon clicking the link, it will take you to the declassified documents on the CIA website, which are in fact a translation of a Ukrainian newspaper. It also provides a 250-page KGB dossier explaining what happened in these events. It gives witness testimony and compelling photographs proving that it actually took place. The unidentified flying object is said to have appeared during military unit training in Siberia, upon which they put this training into play by shooting it down with a surface-to-air missile. And by some odd miracle, the missile actually struck the UFO, bringing it down. They watched the UFO hit the ground a few hundred meters away, so 23 of the soldiers that were in training proceeded to approach the craft. The declassified document explains that upon the soldiers' approach, 5 small humanoid-like beings with large bulbous heads and black eyes proceeded to exit the craft. By this time, the Russian soldiers were just a few meters away from these otherworldly beings, and that's when something miraculous happened. The 5 extraterrestrials suddenly merged into a large ball of light that eventually exploded. During the explosion, there was a flash of bright light, and instantly, the 23 soldiers standing near them turned to stone. They literally petrified the soldiers as a defense mechanism. While 23 of them were instantly turned to stone, 2 of them survived. The KGB report goes on to say that the petrified soldiers were immediately transported to a secret facility near Moscow. Specialists assume that the source of energy that is unknown to humans turned them to stone instantly. It changed the structures of the soldiers, who were living organisms, into the same molecular structure as limestone. This is interesting given the history of our planet. There's a lot of massive structures out there that we do not know the origins of. Many are starting to actually believe that they were once living organisms. Now, nobody really knows whether or not this account is exactly true except for the KGB, but it's intriguing nonetheless. Could this occurrence have something to do with the petrified giants that we find all over the world? And could they be organic beings? Let me know what you think. Again, the link to the CIA document is in the description. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Early wartime submarines and their alleged encounters with monsters of the sea. It would start back in 1915 with Captain Schmidt's German U-boat number 28. As they were making their way through turbulent waters, they would encounter a British steam freighter head-on. This freighter happened to be carrying a nice payload of British military equipment, from vehicles to artillery. So without hesitation, they fire on the ship, sinking it and its 61 crew members within 30 seconds. As the ship submerged, a large explosion happened while underwater. This would cause much debris and shrapnel to land on the German U-boat. To their surprise, as the Germans were trying to dodge the debris, something emerged from around the explosion. It was a massive sea monster with a triangle-shaped head, large teeth, and webbed feet. It would screech in pain and terrorize the U-boat for a short period of time, but before long it would die from its wounds, sinking to the bottom with the shrapnel. Next, we have the alleged encounter of German U-boat number 85. In 2016, when a group of engineers was laying electrical lines at the bottom of the Irish Sea, they discovered the remains of a World War I U-boat. Known for its alleged encounter, it was German U-boat 85. Their account would take place on April 30th, 1918. Captain and crew would be making their way through the Irish Sea looking for British enemies, when suddenly out of nowhere something would collide with the side of their sub. The loud bang and rattling would shake the entire crew, some of them even losing their footing. After making sure they didn't sustain any real damage, the captain would continue on high alert. There were no more occurrences for several minutes, when suddenly out of nowhere he would notice a large looming figure obscuring their path. Thinking it was a possible enemy, he would approach and lock on. This is when he would realize it was definitely no enemy sub. He would explain that you could see the creature's teeth glistening in the moonlight. The British ship HM Coreopsis was on patrol in the Irish Sea when they noticed a large German U-boat. Thinking it was odd that they didn't submerge, they realized it couldn't. As they prepared to fire, they noticed its dilapidated condition and the crew surrendering. The German crew couldn't get on the ship fast enough. Upon surrender, Captain Crack would tell their story. As they approached the looming figure in the sea, it would suddenly disappear in the depths as fast as they saw it. It would approach from the depths as if predator and prey, sinking its large teeth into the hull of the sub. delivering a bite that would pierce the steel. They would have to surface immediately, and that's when they would begin firing on and battling this beast. The fight would rage on for several minutes as this fearsome monster continuously attacked their sub. Eventually, using artillery, they would wound the beast. It would finally swim away. He figured the beast to be 100 feet in length. This encounter at sea would be one of the most mysterious of all time. The images behind me were just published on a Black Vault website and are classified documents. This UFO sighting was written and documented by the U.S. Navy. The pictures depict a battle that took place between the U.S. Navy and said UFO. They were taken by submarine USS Trepang in 1971. The submarine used secret surveillance maneuvers the USA had been practicing in order to capture photos of these said unidentified flying objects. It looks to me as though it may have been a hybrid UFO and a USO, unidentified submergible object as well. They sent the USS Trepang in order to monitor strong alien activity happening in the seas of the Atlantic Ocean at the time, but also to closely study these aircraft and the energy source of which they were gifted. These strange images represent the different types of UFOs that have been regularly spotted by numerous witnesses in many parts of the world. Intriguing to say the least. What do you guys think? Are they legit or not? Comment below, like and follow for more. So just the other day I posted about recorded accounts of submarines being attacked by unknown anomalies underwater. A lot of times it happens during war, but this one happened recently. On October 2nd, the Seawolf-class nuclear-powered fast-attack submarine USS Connecticut was damaged during an underwater collision with an unspecified object in the South China Sea. That was reported on October 7th, almost 6 days later. The submarine remains in safe and stable condition. The Connecticut's nuclear propulsion plant and spaces were not affected and remain operational. The extent of the damage has yet to be assessed. They're going to do an investigation into the damage. Now tell me, what could possibly run into a sub in the sea? Another sub? Not likely, they have sonar. Highly doubt ships. Underwater cliffs or mountains? Not likely. There's no way they're going to run into sea life. Meaning chances are something sized it up and attacked it. A news outlet did happen to report that 11 sailors were in fact injured in the incident, ranging from minor to moderate severity. U.S. soldiers encountered Bigfoot during the Vietnam War. It's over a year into the conflict when a squad of 12 men were making their way back to camp after a long day of fighting. But as they were making their way through the dense jungle, the North Vietnamese attacked. The squad would hit the deck, and after a roll call, they knew everybody was okay. Dusk was just beginning to fall over the jungle, so they couldn't see anybody, but they could see the flash from their muzzle. So they would occasionally pop up and return fire in their direction. When suddenly, what the soldier thought was a bush next to him stood up. The beast stood 7 feet tall and had a body that was pure muscle. It was covered in hair and moved through the jungle with impressive agility. No sooner they hear the North Vietnamese cry out to each other, "Patutu!" And that's when the gunfire stops. Then you hear a beast from their side let out a fierce roar, and seemingly out of nowhere, a dozen of them stand up around them. The Vietnamese began opening fire. One of the beasts was taking fire and running through the bullets, but they quickly dispersed. The U.S. soldiers would retreat and return to base, coming back the next morning. 5 North soldiers dead. U.S. Marines' terrifying encounter during the Vietnam War. The battle took place on Hill 868 of the Quang Nam province. It started when a platoon of about 25 men radioed back to headquarters that they spotted movement in the jungle. The Marines would be told to hold their position and not give themselves away. Just observe the enemy movements and then radio back. They would lay there for 15 minutes, hearing the enemy crash through the jungle all around them. The captain then radioed headquarters. "HQ, this is Alpha." "Yeah, soldier?" "The enemy seems to be slowly surrounding us. And sir, you're not going to believe this. It looks like Bigfoot." Repeat that, soldier." "You heard me." That's when suddenly over the radio, you could hear a fierce roar. A couple dozen would stand up and a battle ensued. The radio cuts off. The next day they would send more soldiers to the last known location of the Marines, finding dead soldiers and dead rock apes. But they would leave the dead bodies, based on witness accounts. Alright my people, I hope you all enjoyed this video. It definitely had some very crazy stories. The Hellhound of Mons was probably my favorite one. That story is freaking crazy. Actually, speaking of the Hellhound, I wanted to talk to you guys about this. In World War II, in 1940s in Germany, they actually shot a legit she-werewolf. Yeah, you heard right. They legitimately have the body on film. Now, some people will say it's fake, but if you look close, I believe otherwise. But that's up for speculation. Actually, I'm planning on going live tonight, so make sure y'all tune in. I'll probably show it there. It's pretty legit. It's crazy as hell. After reading about the Hellhound of Mons, I can't help but think maybe she's a descendant of him. Either way, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. Hit that notification bell. Love y'all. Night God out.